In September 2025, the scenic streets of Kathmandu were disrupted by an unusual sight: burning tires, barricades, and thousands of angry faces. This wasn't just another protest. It was a rebellion led by the youth of Nepal against their own government. What started as a simple ban on social media soon evolved into a full-blown crisis, shaking the nation to its core. This is the story of Nepal's biggest revolution since 1990. The story begins with the arrest of a popular comedian. Deepak Bhadracharyya, known for his satirical political commentary, was taken into custody by the Cyber Bureau of Nepal Police. His alleged crime? Criticizing the government on social media? Now, this wouldn't be a big deal if it were a one-off case. But in a country where dissent often meets violence, it's seen as a red line. Soon, more voices joined the outrage. On September 4th, 3 human rights activists were arrested, followed by the shutdown of multiple news websites. When mainstream media started sharing the stories of those arrested, their internet connection was cut. Nepal was witnessing a crackdown like never before. It all came to a head on September 7th, when the government ordered a nationwide ban on 5 social media sites: Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. To many, this might seem like a drastic move. But in Nepal, it's part of a larger pattern. In recent years, the government has become increasingly heavy-handed, using bans and arrests to control online discourse. Think of it as a form of censorship, but instead of books or newspapers, it's happening on digital platforms. And what's worse, it's becoming more common. According to Nepal's Press Information Center, in the last 2 years alone, there were over 80 cases of such restrictions. So on September 7th, 2025, when the government shut down these platforms, it was no surprise that people would push back. The question was, how far would they go? Surprisingly, very far. Thousands of protesters hit the streets across Nepal, demanding an end to the ban, and more importantly, an end to corruption. It's a tale as old as time. Young people fed up with the status quo, wanting a piece of the action, and tired of being sidelined. They united under one message: end corruption, end censorship, bring change. In cities like Kathmandu, the streets became a sea of humanity. In places like Pokhara and Biratnagar, traffic was blocked and roads were deserted. For once, the youth had found their voice, and they weren't afraid to use it. As the protests peaked, the government seemed stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one side, the protesters with their demands for transparency and accountability. On the other, the ruling elite clinging to power and resisting any form of change. It was a classic David and Goliath situation, except here, David had numbers on his side. As days passed, the protests only intensified. Shops were shuttered, schools were empty, and even public transportation went off the roads. It was as if the entire nation had turned into a protest zone. But as we know from history, when people unite for a cause, even the mightiest can fall. Take, for example, the Arab Spring of 2010. It started with a simple act of defiance: a street vendor setting himself on fire in Tunisia. This ignited a wave of protests that swept across the Middle East and North Africa. One by one, longtime dictators were ousted. Leaders like Ben Ali of Tunisia, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya found themselves out of power. But why? Because they underestimated the power of the people. When ordinary citizens stand up against oppression, even the most entrenched dictatorships can crumble. And let's not forget the Velvet Revolution of 1989 in Czechoslovakia. Here, student-led protests against the communist regime grew into a mass movement. Key figures like playwright Václav Havel used the growing unrest to challenge the government. This peaceful uprising led to the dissolution of the communist government, and the Velvet Revolution became a defining moment in Eastern Europe's transition to democracy. However, not every revolution unfolds without violence. The Ukrainian Revolution of 2014 serves as a powerful example. Pro-democracy protests escalated against the government of Viktor Yanukovych. The situation turned violent. Key figures like Yanukovych were ousted, and a new government was installed. Although the revolution was marked by bloodshed, it underscored the power of citizens to bring about political change. Now let's get back to Nepal. As the protests gained momentum, it was clear that the government was in trouble. The question was, how would they respond? Would they engage in dialogue, address the root causes of the discontent, or would they resort to force? Fortunately, they chose the latter. On September 11th, police began using tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds. Within days, live ammunition was deployed, leaving nearly 20 young people dead. Suddenly, the streets of Kathmandu looked like a war zone. Smoke filled the air, buildings were engulfed in flames, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the valleys. As the death toll mounted, so did the anger. More people joined the protests, each determined to make their voice heard. Amidst this turmoil, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli realized he was in too deep, tried to step down, but this didn't satisfy the protesters. They wanted a complete overhaul of the system, not just a change in leadership. As the chaos reached its peak, the parliament came under siege. Protesters gathered outside, chanting for a complete dissolution of the government. The sanctity of the parliament, once a symbol of the nation's political authority, was now being challenged at its very core. Inside the building, lawmakers were struggling to find a way out of the crisis. The usual political maneuvering wasn't working. Streets were simply too volatile. Meanwhile, the military buildup added to the tension. On September 13th, soldiers were deployed across the capital. Armored vehicles rolled through the streets and checkpoints were set up at every corner. For the first time in years, the people of Kathmandu felt a sense of fear mixed with uncertainty that the country slipped into martial law. While the deployment of the military raised concerns about a possible crackdown, it also served as a reminder of the delicate balance of power in the country. Nepal has a history of political instability, and the military has often played a significant role in shaping its destiny. In the midst of this chaos, a name started circulating: Sushila Karki, the former Chief Justice of Nepal. Many saw her as a beacon of hope, a symbol of impartiality in a sea of political turmoil. The protesters began demanding her appointment as the interim prime minister. This wasn't just about her legal background. It was about seeking someone who could restore order and guide the nation through the crisis. Her image became a rallying point, a representation of the people's desire for a fair and just resolution to the crisis. But the question remains, can one person really make that much of a difference? As the standoff continued, the impact on ordinary life became more apparent. Tourists were stranded in their hotels, unable to explore the sites that drew them to Nepal in the first place. Flights were cancelled, borders tightened, and the bustling streets of Kathmandu turned into ghost towns. The economic implications were significant. Nepal's tourism and trading industries, vital for its economy, were severely disrupted. The country was essentially bleeding its own future, all because of a lack of swift political resolution. By September, the entire nation was on edge. The protests had evolved into a full-blown crisis. The longer the deadlock persisted, the more pressure mounted on the government to act. It was a pivotal moment in Nepal's history, a choice between clinging to power and risking further chaos, or embracing change to restore order. Then came the fateful day, September 26th, when Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli finally stepped down. But this wasn't the decisive end to the crisis many had hoped for. Instead, it was a temporary reprieve. Prime Minister Oli, though officially stepping aside, continued to hold on to power as a caretaker, refusing to relinquish control completely. This unexpected twist left the nation in limbo. The protesters viewed this move as a delaying tactic, and their anger only intensified. They wanted a complete change in leadership, not a carefully orchestrated exit strategy by the incumbent. The streets of Kathmandu once again became the battleground for this power struggle. As the protests raged on, the country teetered on the brink of further chaos. What happens next could shape the future of Nepal. Will this uprising lead to meaningful change, or will it plunge the nation into even deeper turmoil? Only time will tell. Now, this story is still unfolding, and we want to hear from you. What do you think will happen next in Nepal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together, we can understand global politics better. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more insightful stories. Let's stay connected.